All right, so this is a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and this is something that I hear from a lot of people when I ask them. And so usually when I start to work with somebody, I ask them if they meditate, and usually the second question is if they can get to a state where they can turn their mind off. And a lot of people, they say no, they can't turn their mind off even though that they're meditating. And so that's a sign that we have to go a level deeper. And so there's the factor of turning the body off so that we can turn the mind off. Because if we sit down to meditate and we have aches or we have pains in the body or we feel emotions, we're charged, we're not going to be able to relax the mind. And so this is a state of consciousness. And so for a long time, I was in the state of consciousness when I was on medication for ADHD, depression, anxiety, and whatnot. Because during those times, I didn't know what it was like to feel peace. I didn't know what it was like to not have my mind constantly running. And my mind was always working against me. Because I just have this self-defeating concept and my mind was just running this program. And so I just had this super negative self-talk before. And so it was always running in the back of my mind. Something that I was always experiencing. And so it's a state of consciousness when we're stuck living in our mind. And I see it with people that use their mind a lot for work or whatever it may be, that they're forced to use their mind and to stay in their mind for a lot of what they do. Because this happened to me. You know, as an engineer, I had to work and use my mind and be stuck in my mind for a lot of the things that I was doing. And so I was trained to be living in my mind. And from that, I was trapped in it. And so the key to getting out of the mind and switching the mind off is a critical thing to be able to do. Because if we can't switch the mind off, it becomes a burden for us. Because you see, the mind is just supposed to be a tool. We're able to use the mind whenever it's necessary. You know, there's things that we have to think, plan, making a decision, you know whatnot, basic things that we'll use the mind for. But when we need to call upon the mind and use it, perfectly good. But if the mind is calling upon us and using us, then it's not so good. It's the reverse effect. And so there's extremes to this case scenario. And so a lot of people, they live in their minds and they're not actually living because they're not actually experiencing the world around us. And that's what the sense of anxiety is. We're stuck in our mind. Same thing with ADHD, another state of consciousness. We're stuck in the mind, so we're not aware of what's going on around us, and so we can't take in the bits of information that are going in around us. And so before, I used to have a terrible memory when I was taking these medications and I was in a state of consciousness because I wasn't aware of what was happening around me because I'm so caught up with what was going on in my body and what was going on in my mind. Because I was dealing with severe pain as well. And so that takes away from the experience that you can have from being fully present. And so the key thing to be able to switch off the mind, and I've talked about this technique before, and this is a beginner technique that anybody can do, is inhaling through the nose 5 seconds and exhaling through the nose 8 seconds. And so this is something that's super key. And so this breath we exhale longer than we inhale, it triggers the nervous system. And when I say triggers the nervous system, it switches it from a sympathetic state, which is fight or flight, to a parasympathetic state, which is preparing for rest and digest. And so this is key. And so for most people, this can turn on and switch on the nervous system that allows for the mind to rest. But for few people, this doesn't work. It depends on the case, what you're going through and whatnot. But around 30 to 40% of the people that I talk to, this breath will not help them in this case scenario. Because I talked about those aforementioned problems, is because we have to exhaust the mind. We have to calm, or rather we have to calm the body before we can calm the mind. Because if the body is full of energy, we can't just sit down and breathe. It's not something that works like that. So we have to fully exhaust our body. If we're charged with energy, we have anxiety, we feel restless. If you sit down to meditate and breathe, you can't just switch states like that, because the body wants to use all the energy that it has stored. And if it has an excess of energy in the body, that's what's going to show up as this anxiety. And so that's why many people, they're forced to use this energy, which is this anxiety, as a form of overthinking, because they're not moving their body. And when they don't move their body, they're not using the energy that's within the body. And so that energy has to leave the body somehow. And so our brain utilizes a lot of energy. And so when we think, it starts to utilize this energy. And so energy can't be created or destroyed, so it has to go somewhere. And so if you find yourself in a position where you're stuck and you feel like your thoughts are racing and you feel like you can't escape that state of consciousness, and that's just your base state, where you're just constantly driven by the mind and you're constantly in a state of worry, panic, anxiety, ADHD, depression, any of those things, any of those negative states, it means we have an excess of energy, and that energy has to be released. And so one breath does not suit all, because there's some people that do certain breaths and they feel anxiety. And so a lot of these breaths that I tell, this specific one, the 5 in, 8 out, it'll usually work for anybody for calming them down. But for truly shutting the mind off, we have to go that level deeper. We have to go that level deeper. And so that's why it's critical throughout the day to be able to get some movement in, to be able to spend some energy, to be able to do some exercise. And this is why yoga is something that's so critical. Because the sequence for yoga is as follows. You do the postures, and this is something that takes physical movement. And when we take physical movement, we combine that with the breath, we're exhausting our physical body. Because we have 5 bodies, and I'll talk about 3 of them right now. And so that one works on the physical body and also works on the energetic body. It's another one of the bodies. And so when we move through those postures, we put ourselves in those different postures and those movements, we unlock certain energies. We open up certain chakras, energy points. And so we pierce through those 2 levels. And then the third, of course, ultimately, is the breath work, which works on the mental body, the energetic body, and the physical body. And those three bodies mainly. And so when we switch from exhausting the physical body through yoga, through movements, through exercise, and then we go through the breath work, we can then go deeper into the breathwork sequences, which then prepares for meditation, which then works the psychic body and then also the bliss body. And then what I'm talking about here is something called Vedic sciences. And so Vedic sciences believe that there's 5 body types, or five bodies rather. Something that's always existing. And so the goal of yoga, the goal of all the stuff that I try to teach and to impart upon people is to get into the state of bliss. And so our 5th body is that bliss body. And so when we've exhausted and tapped into all those other bodies and we go to the deepest body, we get into this bliss-like state. And that's the end goal for all of this, is to be in the state of bliss and peace. Because once we transcend that mental body, that's when we can really start becoming free. Because a lot of us are just trapped in our physical body. We're trapped in things that we want to do physically, like food, eating, sleep, sex, all those different things. That's living in the physical body. But when we start to work on these different aspects, we can go deeper and we can transcend the mind. And so the mind is no longer working against us. And so we can use the mind like a tool, and the mind is not using us. And so it's super key. If you notice that you can't focus or you can't operate without having the mind run you, and you notice you do meditations, you notice you do breath work, and you notice the mind is still running, it's definitely a sign that you need to exhaust the physical body. Because if you don't, then you're going to be trapped in the mind still. And to get out of that physical mind, we have to drop it into the physical body first. But these are something that's super key, because I see this a lot with the people that I work with that deal with these hardcore problems of pain and anxiety. And they can't get out of the mind. And so when I was in those states before as a child and a teenager, even as an adult taking these pills, I didn't know what peace was like, because I never experienced those brief moments where I was outside of the mind, where the mind wasn't working against me, where my mind just wasn't running with constant chatter. And so when I first finally achieved that state through breathing and meditation, and this is something that anybody can do, and I've walked dozens and dozens of people through to achieve this state, is a state of peace, state of bliss. And it's something that we can arrive to 10, 15 minutes. And this is something that anybody can do. You don't have to be some special master or anything. This is something any normal person can do. And this is the greatest gift somebody can have, is this peace. And so if you're struggling to get out of your mind, feel free to book the free 30-minute call with me, and I will walk you through how to break that trap. I hope everybody has a beautiful day. It's kind of rainy here, as you can see. I'm about to end this walk, and I hope everybody has a beautiful rest of their Saturday and the rest of their weekend.